Well, I think we'll get started, everyone. So, for everyone who's arrived, thank you so much for coming. I'm really pleased to welcome my good friend and colleague, Chrystene Ells. Chrystene has had an amazing career. Um, you know, Spanning having worked on Nightmare Before Christmas as like a model maker. I got to know her while we worked at the same college teaching visual effects students, where Chrystene first taught the art classes and then founded the whole fine arts department at this school. And then she's gone on to do an amazing series of things like directing a feature film, like founding a whole puppet film theater and festival, to doing art therapy with elderly, deaf people, and now with people in hospice, and so much more. Just generally, just always creating incredible artwork, and as an incredible person just to talk to. But today is about her new series of artwork where she's been reacting to the extraordinary events we've all been seeing in the news that are really hard to even face, much less process. What I thought I'd start with before we jump into the images is just I hit a couple of the highlights there, but can you want to just introduce yourself a little bit more? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your career.
I think you got it. That was pretty good. Those are all such distant lifetimes. I think the only thing you forgot is that I started off picking peas in a market garden when
Ah,
I was 12. That's
that
the
wasn't on your
beginning of my
CV, I
career.
don't think so.
No. Anyway, no, that's it. I just kind of can't decide what I want to be when I grow up, so I just keep trying stuff.
Great. Okay, well, I think we should just jump right into the images, and you can fill in the backstories of the whys of how you started doing this as we look at those. But what I'll do is I'll share my screen, and then you guys will see that, and you'll see Chrystene in the corner of the screen talking. So we'll start with the first one.
And I just want to say that I don't really know why I'm doing this or what this project is about. So I'm actually hoping to learn something from people that are joining us today. If you have any comments or thoughts or feedback or suggestions or questions, I'd be really happy to engage with that on that level because I'm kind of in it. I'm in the whirlwind of it, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, so why don't you just go ahead and start with this first image?
Well, the first image, I guess, the first image came out of this anxiety that I have about, and I was talking to a friend yesterday about this, the 24-hour news cycle and this constant sort of information that's coming at us all the time. And especially during now that most of us are in lockdown or we're not leaving our homes much, we're fear scrolling. I'm calling it fear scrolling. It's just like, oh my God, the polar bears are dying. I can't look at that. Or, this is happening or that is happening. And you just kind of like scroll. And you just kind of get completely full of anxiety about all these things you can't do anything about or that you can't control. And and the alternative is to just not engage at all. And I don't have I can't do that. I have to I have to see what's happening out there. So I decided I was just going to sit with something just for 20 minutes, just pick an image or a story that first morning that I was feeling like this, which happened to be almost exactly 15 weeks before the American election, and sit with it and be with it. And the way that I do that in my life is to sketch it. So, I like to go out and do what we used to call sketch crawls, where you go out into the world and you sit with something. You go to some cool cafe or something and sketch the people around you, or you go, like when I was in San Francisco, we go to Chinatown and draw the architecture. And so this was kind of a weird sketch crawl kind of idea, sketch crawling through the news, where you kind of sit with something and become familiar with it. So yeah, so what was happening when um, on the day that I started doing this was that these Black Lives Matter protests had been kind of erupting all over America for some time. But things in Portland were really heating up, and there were these uh, forces that looked like military, like in Portland, where I just was like 6 months ago visiting friends. And there's, tear gas and there's guns, and it looks like, it doesn't look like the United States of America to me. And what really struck me on that first day is that there was this, it was the beginning of what has become the Wall of Moms, where a bunch of women, moms, mothers of all ages and from all cultural backgrounds come together, and they're in these yellow t-shirts with bicycle helmets and backpacks, and they're linking arms to protect the protesters from these forces, these federal forces. And that was just so, I mean, I'm almost starting to cry just telling you the story, because it's so powerful that these women, they have no armor, they don't have guns, they didn't even have masks or gas masks at the beginning, and they're there putting their bodies on the line to protect the First Amendment rights, the freedom of speech, and the right to protest. That's really intrinsic to what America is and what America is about. And now I live in Canada, and I think maybe it would be more relevant, some might say, for me to be engaging with Canadian politics. But honestly, with the rainforest burning, and like I said, the polar bears are dying, and you know what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Hong Kong, like it's so overwhelming that I have to focus on something. And so I'm just being kind of reactive to what is coming across my feed and what I see first and what kind of hits me first. And that's where I'm going. So I did the first one and I thought, well, that's cool. I can step away from the news now because I feel like I just kind of actually sat with something for a minute. So I did. And I thought, oh, this is good. I'm going to start doing this every day. And I decided to share it just with a small group of friends on Facebook, which I don't normally do. I don't normally post my work. And I've actually been kind of withdrawing from the public life the last year or two. I feel less interested in being out in front of everybody. But so I decided to share it. And right away, people started commenting and reacting to it, responding to it. And then a friend asked if I would make the post public so that she could share it. And I thought, and Sherry, I don't know if you're out there, but that's you. And so she, because she asked me, I thought about it and then I decided to go for it. So from then on, all the posts have been public and they're getting shared. And then I can track that they're being shared, but they're being shared by those people's friends and into private groups and friends. And I don't even know where they're going. Like they're just going off on the wind into the world. So, and I started getting more and more comments and people started following me. And anyway, so I started doing this, and today's day 14, which I haven't done that drawing yet. Well, I have partly done it, but it's been 2 weeks. So, and I'm hoping to go as long as I can.
Chrystene, can you show, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Can you show us, just hold up the book, and just so people can see the real size. Do you have that particular image we were just looking at? Just so people can see the size of it and the kind of reality of it. I might switch.
Yeah, it's tiny. These drawings are tiny. So the sketchbook's 4 inches by 6 inches. And they're all in here, like all the drawings are in here. And I was showing Andrew before that because I'm 55, my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. And I intentionally wanted to do small drawings so that I wouldn't spend all day on them. So that's why I'm making them so small. But I actually have this device, which helps me with the seeing the tiny,
very
tiny
sci-fi.
image. I know. My friend told me I look like something from The Watchmen. Anyway. Okay, so this was day 2, and the Wall of Moms is now becoming a more formalized sort of component of the Portland protests. The images of soldier types, walking through tear gas clouds with guns raised is becoming more ubiquitous. And that day across my feed, I think, I forget where I saw it, but someone had taken a video, they were videotaping the, they're shooting the Statue of Liberty, and then this big lightning strike came down, I guess behind it, but it looked like it hit the Statue of Liberty. And so I thought, that's such a great visual metaphor for how I'm feeling about when I look back home at America, is this massive divide between, everything that's represented by the Wall of Moms and everything that's represented by these unmarked federal forces that nobody at that time could figure out who they were. They're not soldiers. They're not, police, local police. Nobody knew who they were. They didn't have name tags. They didn't have badges. And so that felt like the Statue of Liberty represents America. It's such a visual metaphor for all that's good and right about America and its self-image. And with the lightning strike hitting it, it just seemed like the perfect way to visually describe what I was feeling, just being like that feeling of being ripped in half.
Yeah, so it's a really striking image. And one quick technical question was, what materials are you using, what medium, and also about how long do you spend on your drawings?
Well, the idea is 20 minutes. So the first few are fairly rough, and I'm sticking within 20 or 30 minutes, but sometimes I get a bit carried away. And mostly I use a variety of different media, but this is watercolor. I have a little tiny watercolor kit. That's my portable watercolor kit. So that's what I use for the watercolor. I use pen and ink, lots of graphite, and that's about it. Nothing really fancy. So this one was a really hard one to do. One of the things that I've been researching is how many times protesters have been shot in the head by these forces. And it wasn't just in Portland, it was all through the Black Lives Matter protests across the country. I think I'm tracking about 8 people that have wounds that look like this right between their eyes. And I think 8 people have lost vision in one eye from being shot in the head by these federal forces at protests. And that's just really shocking to me. Like, again, it's hard to talk about. And I saw the video of this young man, Donovan Labella, and I saw the video of him holding that boombox up, and he was about that far away from a line of federal agents. And he was just standing there holding a boombox. And the song he was playing was about, I don't have the lyrics in front of me, but it was like, let's come together, let's have love instead of hate. I mean, that's the lyrics to this song are so nonviolent. And he suddenly, they throw a tear gas grenade at him, and he kind of pushes it away, and then he puts the boombox back up, and then he gets shot in the head. And it's so shocking. And so I just wanted to sit with that young man for a minute. He's having a lot of issues as he's trying to recover. He has a metal plate in his head, and he's really struggling. He's like 26-year-old nonviolent guy that was into de-escalating situations, and everybody seemed to think he was a great kid, and now he's changed possibly for life. So that's the backstory on that. You can follow him. You can look up Donovan Labella. I spelled it wrong in there. It's Donavan, and see where he's at now in recovery.
It's intense, and that's such a powerful image as well.
Yeah. Okay. So this is, so I was following some freelance journalists on Twitter who were actually at the protests, and they were posting these like 9-10-second videos. One of them is Sergio Olmos, and I think that's who this is from. And he's actually, I think he's with the New York Times also, but he was like on the ground at the protests shooting stuff. And there was this, and I don't know the whole story, obviously. I wasn't there. I don't know what exactly happened, but the image was so striking. There was this little girl in a black hoodie. She's really small, maybe 5'2", I'm guessing, looked really slender. And she had these 2 bouquets of flowers, purple flowers that looked like hydrangeas. And she was just dancing. She was dancing in front of the police, and she was offering them flowers. And other protesters came up, and they were kind of trying to protect her. And then suddenly something happened, and they grabbed her, and she just was hustled off away behind a fence. And like 13 or 15 of these people with guns and all this armor and gas masks and everything were kind of like walking backwards behind her with their guns, like aiming their guns at the protesters as they're hustling away this little girl with her flowers. And again, it was just so like shocking and upsetting. And so I sat with that one, and I named this one "Who Will Pick Up the Flowers." I think it has a second name, but anyway, so just that image of those flowers, her flowers being dropped as she's hustled off by these armed men, was a terrifying metaphor for what I feel is what's going on. Okay, so one of the things about the Portland protests is that a lot of the imagery that I was seeing and a lot of the imagery that I was sketching was of white protesters being engaged by the forces. And I started researching why that might be. And I found out that, first of all, Portland is like 77% white. And I can't remember what the other reason is. It's in the write-up of this, but there are two reasons for that, that we're seeing mostly white protesters. So I wanted to focus and bring the focus back on not just this clash between the forces and the protesters, but on the heart of what this is all about, which is Black Lives Matter. And, you know, the event that kicked this all off, which is, of course, the death of George Floyd. And so I intentionally sought out an image of a protester from the African-American community. And I found this beautiful image of this Black mom out there with her sign saying, Black moms have been doing this for years. Black Lives Matter always. And I just thought that was such a powerful statement. And so I just wanted to circle back to, like I said, like the heart of what the protests are about to begin with. And so that's what this image is about. Okay, this one was intense. I was really wondering who these forces were. And this is when I started learning about that people were starting to put it together, where the forces had come from, who they were, who their command, you know, their chain of command and everything else. Because I think at first I thought they were some kind of branch of the military, because they're dressed like the military, they're wearing military stuff, they have military gear. And they were just so, they weren't acting like cops, you know, like protect and serve kind of cops, observers that are kind of like trying to keep things calm. They didn't act like that. They were doing some pretty intense stuff, like shooting people in the head with non-fatal munitions. So this video came across my feed of a Army medic from the Vietnam War. He was a Vietnam vet. He won some medals, or I don't know much about military jargon, but he won some. He was you know, a good soldier and honorably discharged. And so he was out there. He's an older guy, obviously, since he was a soldier during Vietnam, and he was talking to this line of these federal forces, and he was just talking to them. He's a photographer too, he's a journalist photographer. So that strap over his shoulder is actually his camera. And he's saying, you took an oath. He's talking about the Constitution, and he's telling them, I was in Vietnam. Like, you have no idea what we did in Vietnam. Like what was, and he was starting to tell them about his experiences in Vietnam. And this guy just entered the frame from the, what side is that? I'm dyslexic. The left-hand side of the frame, and just put this tear gas, or not tear gas, what is it? Pepper spray? Right in his face. And that's not even an exaggeration. The vet turned to look at him, and he got a face full of this spray. And it was so shocking to me. And that's when I started doing research about who these guys are, and maybe some women. And I have quite a write-up on what I uncovered in terms of research, but they're basically a kind of, people are calling them a secret police force, and, you know, all these different sort of names, because they're from all different areas of the federal government, from the Department of Homeland Security and Border Patrol and all these different areas. And you can go down quite a rabbit hole if you're trying to research that. But what I really wanted to get across with this image is, this is not the military. The guy shooting the pepper spray is not from the military. The guy being shot with the pepper spray is from the military, and they have different codes of conduct. The military has a code of conduct that these other forces apparently don't have the same kind of procedural conduct requirements or repercussions for bad behavior. So that's what this image was about. People think this image is a bit funny. It's Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler. He's not super popular, I don't think, with either side, at least at that time. When he went down to the protest one night in Portland, he was booed and catcalled and stuff. And so he went down there and he was kind of trying to talk to the protesters. And I think, you know, he was making some connection with them. And then in the middle of nowhere, the whole scene was tear gassed by these agents. And he said, I 100% did not see anything that should have required that the crowd be tear gassed at that moment. And he was so pissed off. And so this image of him is actually, if you want to use it, Getty owns it now, and it's like worth $550 to use the photograph that this came from. But I don't know if I'm even allowed to paint from it, but I did. So yeah, there he is learning about tear gas. He couldn't believe it. He's never been tear gassed before. So they got this picture of him right after the tear gas. And the background is just things that I've seen at the protests. Some of the spray painted stuff, stolen land, you know, the indigenous voices that are there, defend Black Lives Matter. And of course the American flag being carried upside down, which is interestingly, I've seen it being carried by vets at the protests. In addition to the wall of moms, there's also a wall of vets now, which is really interesting to me, that they're defending the public against these forces. So anyway, that's that image. Okay, so then the guy at the top of the food chain in this, I don't even know what his, I don't know who he is, but he's I think the Attorney General, or the top cop. He's the Attorney General, Bill Barr. And the Congress brought him in to talk to him about what was going on in Portland and at these protests and other protests where people have been trampled by horses and, you know, beaten and disappeared into unmarked cars and all this crazy stuff that doesn't sound like the America that I have in my mind, but it obviously is the America of right now. So she, I'm sorry, I don't exactly know how to say her name, but I'm assuming Pramila Jayapal is a representative from somewhere. Sorry, I don't have that information, but she was talking to Bill Barr during this inquiry. And she was referencing back in April when a bunch of armed white protesters stormed the government's mansion in Michigan, I think. And they were screaming at cops who were standing there in their blues. It wasn't like those federal forces, it was just police standing there just taking abuse by all these angry people. There were swastikas that were being flashed. There was a Barbie doll representing the female governor of Michigan that was being carried around in a little noose, a naked Barbie doll. So they were threatening to lynch her. They were calling to behead her. They were calling to kill her, shoot her. And what they were angry about is that the pandemic lockdown was requiring them not to go out and do stuff in the world. That's what they were angry about. And I mean, you can look it up. There's images of them with the giant guns in the like rotunda of the legislature, posing like they're soldiers. And so Jayapal is pointing out the difference between that, where nothing happened. These federal forces didn't come down and shut down that really frightening protest in the legislature building. But when Black Lives Matter protesters took to the streets, of course, these federal forces came and descended on them. So she's making this point here. And when I saw that, I thought that was a very powerful contrast. So down at the bottom are two flags, and one is the Black Lives Matter fist flag, which is kind of the logo of the movement, or one of them. And then on the other side, of course, the swastika, which I did not want to draw in its totality. So I drew a droopy flag with a swastika on it, so you can't quite see the shape, but it's unmistakable what it is. Whereas the Black Lives Matter flag is proudly flying. All right, so this is a crazy image. and you can read about it, or there's actually a link to it, the video. Uh, this is right after I think a tear gas canister had been thrown by a bunch of retreating federal forces in Portland, and just out of the fog comes very, very calmly this member of the press, and he's just completely covered in, gear. I think it's a motorcycle helmet, maybe, I don't know exactly, and black, completely covered in protective clothing, and he's got his rig with his different devices on it, different recording devices, and he's just walking calmly through the smoke. And I was like, this is really insane what it's taking for the press to cover these protests now. Like, this is what journalism looks like in America today. And so this was a thank you to those people that are out there doing this work, that are bringing us the stories and the images. All right, well, this is John Lewis. This is a kind of a little bit of a step away from, the street, and getting into something a little bit more historical, and contemporary, and kind of removed, but at the same time, it's really connected. John Lewis was a great civil rights leader who just passed away last month, July 17th. And his eulogy by President Barack Obama, was so incredibly touching. I encourage everyone to watch it, but it was also extremely rousing and inspiring and motivating. And also, John Lewis had written, he knew he was probably getting close to the end of his life, and he wrote his last words, and he asked that they be published on the day of his funeral. And this quote is from that. And he actually was at the Black Lives Matter protests, and he was engaged right till the very end. And there was something about what he left us with that filled me with hope after this, basically a week of really being anxious and depressed at what I was seeing coming out of Portland. And on the very day of his funeral, the protest in Portland had a sea change because the federal forces were withdrawn. And so on the day of his funeral, the protests went back to just being people protesting in the streets, and the tear gas was gone, and the arrests were gone, the shooting was gone, the violence was gone. And so that's what this post was about. And that's young John Lewis, and that's John Lewis in 2003 from a couple different photographs. This is as close as I've gotten to a political cartoon. I'm not really a political cartoonist. Mostly what I do is respond through images, but this one, when I read that one person died per minute in the United States from COVID or COVID-related conditions, that just made my heart stop. So this image it's just called Death Watch, and it's pretty self-explanatory. There's 1,449 people that died of COVID, I think on July 29th. And so there's, I don't know if you can see it, but there's little coffins are the minute marks on this watch, and it's 5 to midnight. Okay, so this is a few days after the federal forces had been withdrawn. And we had in Portland what Portland Mayor Ed Wheeler called a ceasefire, which is shocking to think of a ceasefire against citizens in an American city by federal forces. So on July 24th, I had painted this watercolor at the top that I didn't end up using that day. I focused on something else ultimately, of this one lone kind of Black Lives Matter knight with their homemade shield and their who knows what kind of spear, but it just reminded me of a knight, like a medieval knight leaving the battlefield. And there's just clouds of tear gas that this person is staggering out of. A week later, in the exact same streets around the courthouse of Portland, there was a massive party. People were dancing, people were drumming, people were chanting, there were speakers set up, people were giving talks. And it went on into the wee hours of the morning, and then it kind of dissipated and people went home. And I thought, what a difference. Those forces were sent in to create law and order, but the minute they left, things, calmed down. And it's that idea of, if you push against people, they're going to push back, you know, and it doesn't actually de-escalate situations to have that kind of, to be pushing people the way that those forces were pushing the protesters. So this is just a kind of a celebration of the First Amendment and people protesting and people being able to be in the street and demand an address of their grievances. So this is yesterday, and this is another image that is an actual person. Her name is Lakeisha Rollins, and she was interviewed by, I think, the Washington Post. And she's just one of, you know, millions of people who are out of work, who are now potentially losing the $600 unemployment benefit, and who are facing eviction from their homes. The numbers on this are shocking because the Senate did not pass the eviction moratorium, and they didn't pass the 600. They didn't prolong the $600 unemployment benefit. So in 2019, I think in November, there were, I think, 570,000 homeless people in America. 570,000. Yeah. They're talking about up to 28 million Americans, and possibly, by some estimates, up to 40 million Americans could be homeless within the next few months. And that is just stunning to me. Like, from 570,000 in a system where I know, because I lived in San Francisco, every homeless person is not getting the best care and the best resources. And that's being doubled, triple. Actually, I think I figured it out. It's 40 something times as many homeless that could be exploding into the community in the next few months if this isn't taken care of. So I just had this sense of people, like, where are they going to go? What are they going to do? What's going to happen to these people? And so as I was drawing Lakeisha, I started to realize that I was seeing her vanish right before my eyes. And so I thought, oh, I'm just going to continue with that. And it's a statement on the disappearing people. Because I think this image is called Where Are They Going to Go? So that's 13, 14's coming today.
Well, that was extraordinary. I'm just like, I think that the couple of things that was going through my mind. I mean, the images themselves are so amazing, but I think that the understanding, part of why I wanted to do this is I think about how I react sometimes to the news, and I think this is for a lot of people, is that we all have a defense mechanism. We look at it with just a resignation of like, oh, yep, things are bad and getting worse. That's how it is. Or we just turn it off, or we have some mental block that we put just to sort of protect our emotions. And I think even before you put pencil to paper, the way that you have faced this face on and really took it in and really felt it. I mean, that first step alone is really brave, but then kind of put these amazing images on paper is kind of it just is a miraculous next step. And I'm so impressed by it. And that's partly why I wanted to do this webinar and share it with everyone, because I think it's amazing. And I think there's something about looking at an illustration that's so different from looking at a photograph or a video. And I think we see so many photographs and so many videos that and again, in that defense mechanism, that way of tuning things out, we have a way of tuning that out that I think something that the watercolor and the image and the pencil lines, whatever, just kind of pull you into it rather than you want to, at least for me. So
that's interesting.
So someone said, Chrystene, you said in your statement, I was seeing everything all at once and it was overwhelming and impossible to engage with. I needed a smaller light. I think that many can relate with this feeling. What news sources are you looking at before you do the drawings, and how long do you actually spend looking at news stories before you choose a subject each day?
You know, the goal was to just spend 20 minutes a day on this, but of course the research is hours. I usually, I follow different news organizations and some other um, people on Twitter. I mean, it's Twitter. But I find that a lot of the stuff that's happening right now, it goes to Twitter. And then I can follow that and hit links and go off into like legitimate news sources like, you know, I think they're legitimate, the New York Times or Washington Post or, you know, wherever it might take you. So a lot of where it really usually start is Twitter. And that's where I was getting all these images from the protests because people were posting them to Twitter instantaneously. So within 5 minutes, I might see something that happened 5 minutes ago in Portland, you know, or on the street somewhere. But then I'm not a journalist. I don't have any journalist training. I'm not a political cartoonist, but I don't, of course it's filtering through me and my perspective of the world, right? So that's just going to be in there. But what I really want to try to do is give anyone who's looking at these the information and the resources to pursue going down the rabbit hole of that particular issue if they want to. So I include links in all of my posts as to where I got the information. And I try to cross-reference. So I try to use 2 or 3 sources, and I try to be maybe not as objective, but I try to be as factual as I can based on what I can find. And I try not to cherry pick. You know, like the Black moms have been doing this for decades drawing. That was challenging for me because, you know, one of the links in that particular image, the narrative that accompanies it, is a commentary by, I think he's the head of the ACLU in Oregon. And he said, no, sorry, the NAACP. And he said, the name of his article was something like, these protests are supposed to be about Black Lives Matter, but they've become white spectacle. So, you know, I realized I had been drawing all these white protesters. So including that was challenging to me, obviously, and reminding me of, you know, to circle back. So I try to supply information, even if it's challenging, to anybody who's following.
Here's another comment. This is from Joanne Weber. I am so taken with Chrystine's work. She is exercising one of the roles of an artist, and that is to be prophetic. In selecting isolated incidents from the media which threatens to glaze over our eyes, she is exercising a prophetic function to alert, to warn us, to paint a picture of a culture and a country at war with itself.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought that was really nicely said.
Yeah, thank you to Joanne for that.
Someone asks, where can we see your works? Are you on Instagram?
I am on Instagram. Thank you for asking. It's called art.posthaste. So art.posthaste. That's probably the easiest way to see the stuff because I'm probably going to start moving away from Facebook and into Instagram.
You've touched on this a little bit, but tell us a little bit more about the response that you've been getting from your images.
You know, like I said, I really wasn't planning on doing this for the public. It was just for me. And so when I started posting, I was surprised that really, I would have to say, the most common thing people say is thank you. People keep saying thank you, and they say keep going. There's lots of comments, and what's interesting to me too is that people that don't know each other, that are in my friends community, people from California, people that are in Australia, people that are in England, they're all having conversations in the threads underneath and supporting each other and you know, adding to the conversation. And there's private messages. People are, you know, are engaging with me privately also. And people say that, like I have a couple quotes here from my Facebook feed, but I would just say that in general, people that are living in America right now seem to be really overwhelmed and frightened. And everyone who isn't in America, who's looking at this with me from outside America, is just horrified and, you know, sad. But here's some quotes. Carrie said, "This is a record of a tragedy so monumental, it's painful but necessary. I weep." So talking about the art being painful but necessary. Sharon said, these are illuminating and thought-provoking. The contrast is shocking in a way a news article would never reach me. And Jill yesterday said, this is also terrifying, especially as a citizen of the US and feeling powerless. Your voice and art are so powerful, expressing the deepening chaos. So that's just kind of a selection, but I mean, I get these kind of things every day. So I'm like, oh, maybe I can do another day, or maybe I could do another week, because it's hard work. It's actually really draining and heartbreaking. And it's not as therapeutic as I thought it was going to be ultimately, because I'm getting even more engaged with, I get engaged with the stories and the research, and, you know, it's taking up a lot of time. But because of the response, I get all this energy. Like I post something and then I check Facebook later and I've got all these messages, and it's like, okay, this is something. I've got energy from the community, and now I can go forward and do another one tomorrow, you know? So it's really helpful to have that support and the engagement.
Has there been any negative response?
You know, not on my feed. Nobody's responded in any way negatively. At first I'm an artist and I like to put out my best work, and I was a little self-conscious putting out these sketches, which to me are very rough, a lot of them, and not very well executed. And I was expecting maybe some comments on that, but, you know, nothing negative in that way. But I did an interview with CBC here in Canada, and I was hesitant because I don't really want to be out in public. But they told me they would turn off commenting on their story when they posted it on their site. So I said, okay, then I'll do it. But they also posted it on their Facebook page, and there's the comments there are not about the work. I mean, I haven't read them. I just went for a second and I was like, oh my God, it's like a little mini war zone all its own in the comments under the article. And it's really just people sniping at each other from different political perspectives. And there's some pretty angry confrontations going on there. And I didn't read far enough to even know if people are commenting on the project, but that's what I want to avoid. Like, I'm not interested in that. That's not why I'm doing this. I'm not doing this to argue or to cause more trouble or to push people. I don't actually know why I'm doing it. That's one of the reasons I'm doing this today, is to try to figure out why this is happening in my life right now.
I have one sort of kind of hardball question I've wanted to throw at you just to kind of foster some conversation, but why is your point of view relevant on these topics if you're not directly affected? You're white, you're living in Canada at a great distance from these things, you're not being tear gassed, you're not being shot in the head, you're not, you know, in particular being, you know, subjected to these sort of things. So what do you think? Has that been in your head or your heart at all? Like, what is your place in this? What's your role in this? Like, it doesn't matter who you are that you're making these, and if you're affected by it.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think about it a lot. When I was younger, I was out there in the streets in San Francisco protesting the first Gulf War, and I was in the thick of it. Like, there were helicopters flying around above us. The cops were just dressed kind of like maybe riot police, but they looked like police, like city police, and they were just kind of following the protests. But there were some bad apples. There were like some guys with bandanas that were breaking windows, and, you know, and all the peaceful protesters would get up there and hustle them away from doing damage. And they blew up a cop car under the Bay Bridge. And, you know, like I've been in those situations. But yes, I'm extremely removed from it now. That was 30 years ago or so. And I don't know that my POV is relevant. Like, I'd like to ask the viewers, is it relevant? Why is it relevant? I don't know. I'm not, like I said, I didn't get a grant. This isn't a funded project. Nobody's supporting this project except through their energy. And I don't know how long I'm going to keep going. So I don't even have like a thesis statement, you know, about the project. And I don't know if my voice is relevant in terms of the content. But what I do know is that art is always the thing I throw at anything. If I'm feeling something, I see something, I dream something, that strikes me and sits with me and I can't shake it, then I turn to art, you know. And so that's what I'm doing. And a long time ago, I saw a cute little cartoon of a guy looking at a flower. It's 2-panel cartoon, a guy looking at a flower, the first panel, and it says step 1, wonder at something. And then the second panel is he's still looking at the flower and there's other people also looking at the flower, and it says invite others to wonder with you. And that's the role of being an artist. And in a way, I think that's what this is, in a way, is that I'm wondering about this, what's happening. And I'm also inviting anyone who wants to wonder with me. And so maybe my point of view isn't relevant. And I completely accept that. But I don't know what else to do. I'm not in the streets. I'm not in Portland. I'm not 25. This is how I feel like I can engage with it. I don't know if that answers the question. If anyone has any ideas out there.
I thought that's a brilliant answer, and it's a little bit. I think you were getting into what inspired me to want to host this webinar in the first place, which is, we've invited the larger community, but I also invite Olive Frame Store, and we're a company full of artists, and we've been internally having a conversation about these events, some of these events, and how do we respond, and I think that a company of all artists, many of whom, like yourself, aren't directly affected by this. Some of them who are. How do artists respond in this situation? And I just, it really appealed to me, the idea. Well, with art, you know what I mean? like, use what you do, use what you knew, use what makes you who you are. So yeah, I thought that was pretty strong. So let's, what else did I have? This one's a pretty weighty one. I said, this is even bigger than your project in general, but I'd just love to hear your thoughts on it. Is there hope that we are forging a new and better world through all of this conflict and chaos? Some of what I personally like to believe is that the pendulum must swing far in one direction before it can swing further back in the other. And so, in animation terms, I'm hoping this is like the anticipation. You know what I mean? This is like the pulling back of the bow before we can launch forward. And I'm just wondering, what are your feelings? Do you have a kind of long-term optimistic view that this is actually helping, in a sense, wake people up and pull people together for a better future? Or do you see this as things cracking and falling apart? Where do you land on that?
Oh God, if I had I would love to know what the outcome is. One theory is that the Hadron Collider actually created a black hole in 2012, and we went into a new reality that has nothing to do with the world we were in before. You can sit with that and think, well, maybe we're just going into the black hole. Astrologers say that in January of this year, there was some kind of planetary conjunction that's only happened a couple times in the last 2,000 years. I have an astrologer friend who was saying that all systems are going to collapse. Educational, economic, political, healthcare, like all the systems are going to collapse. And it's going to be like the falling tower in the tarot card. And it's a necessary thing because nothing's working. Like people are starving in America, the wealthiest nation, for decades. So, and they don't have healthcare, and there's problems all over the world. And so, there's that perspective that this is a necessary sort of purging. Another friend of mine said, and who's a kind of more spiritual person, and she said, I was thinking about, what if Trump is actually this great bodhisattva, the greatest soul of all, who agreed to come back to earth for this purpose, to take on the burden of the destruction of the whole system so that we could start again. And I was like, that's a pretty far out perspective. But I think in all of these kind of, well, maybe not the black hole one, but in a lot of the dialogue, I feel like people are saying, this is kind of necessary. We can't keep shoring up this fractured system, this structure that it's not sustainable. It's not working anymore. We need to kind of start over. I don't know. I'm an optimist. As heartbreaking as this is, as challenging as these times are, as much as I am raw and crying when I'm doing this work. I mean, sometimes I have to move to not cry on my watercolor while I'm working. Um, I do have hope. I do have hope. I think we have something amazing here in um, the human experience, the human reality. We have so much potential, and I do feel like we can come out. It's always a pendulum. It's not like we're going to get there and then we've arrived and we're done and it's finished and we've, you know. But I do feel like there's got to be something that's the contra of this. All, you know, like the other side of the coin. There's always the opposite. It's always with us. It's like my death puppet here, you know, death is with life. We're always two sides of the coin. So in the depths of despair, in a weird way, I find optimism. And I think a lot of the drawings, when I was looking at them today, so many of them show the optimism of people standing up, you know, like that unarmed vet getting sprayed in the face, or the wall of moms. You know, there's optimism in the people. There's power in the people. So yeah, I think I do have optimism. I don't know if my work shows it, but I think I have it. It's an
I think it
underlying
does. I
theme.
think it does. And just, yeah, another comment. Thank you for your images, your intellect, and love. Your images give strong voice in places where words can't express. The images are portals to understanding in another way, a real way. Thank you. And I think that one of the things, this is almost well, this is an entirely separate conversation I want to have at some point with some people, but you know, there's this question of what is the role of art and why is art essential? And I think this helps answer that question where, um, like you're saying, I'm connecting with these events in a way that I wouldn't have if it was just a piece of video or a news clip or some text. And I think, you know, there was a thing that inspired me that I had seen this, it was a survey in Singapore and they were rating, you know, what are essential jobs? And the top one was healthcare worker and, you know, food supply and those kinds of things. And the least essential job was
Way
artist.
down at the bottom.
Literally, it was the bottom. It was
I
considered the
know.
least
I think I
essential.
saw that
And I
list.
believe that art is essential. And I think this is just one of 10,000 examples we could find, but I just thought, you know, that was an interesting one. A couple other things that popped up in the Q&A. We are running out of time. Great work. Love the way you are processing and inspiring. This is not exactly a question. You just wanted to share part of the story you just learned, which is a friend of a friend was shooting video and when leaving the scene was pulled over by the police and had her window smashed and her tires slashed by police. And he's put a link to that. This is another one. Thank you for your powerful work. There seem to be types of sketches, one black and white with words and the other where you play with color and imagery. How do you choose which type you're going for? Is it something you come up with intuitively?
Yes, it's something I come up with intuitively. I think sometimes the images themselves are super powerful, and then sometimes I feel like the images need a little context. So, like this one of the disappearing woman, for example. I don't know if you can
Oh,
see that.
sorry, let me make you full screen.
Um, that is an interesting image, but without the context of the text, which is as many as 28 million Americans face eviction over the next 8 weeks. The image doesn't have any context. So yeah, sometimes it's about the context, and sometimes like this image I think is pretty self-explanatory of the young girl getting hustled away by the police after dancing with fistfuls of hydrangeas, however you say that, flowers. Does anyone have any thoughts about why this is engaging? Like I said, I'm not really, I don't, I'm in the thick of it, so I don't have the global perspective of, like, to answer a question like, why is my voice relevant, or why is this working, or
There's something already in there, which I'll read to you, which is kind of on that topic from our good friend Valerie, which she
hi
says,
Valerie.
Christine, what you are doing is totally relevant. You are responding from your heart. That is what is missing from the people who can shoot someone so easily without feeling. I love what you are doing. I can feel what you are feeling through it. I don't know what to do either, but I'm working with art and writing without knowing where it's going. You have such courage to allow yourself to feel and share it. We'll talk very soon.
Wow, thank you, Valerie. Something I
Oh, and
have
then she says, much
feelings
love,
here.
Val. I don't know. I mean, there's always something in art about seeing the artist's hand in the work. You know what I mean? There's such a craving for that to see, and you see that so clearly with the paper and the pencil and the watercolor and stuff. And there's something with cameras being so ubiquitous now. Everybody has one on their phone. Everybody's got a GoPro mounted on everything. There's nothing humanized or personalized. There's something maybe almost even dehumanizing about a camera point of view, whereas you and I think that also that it shows that you had to take this stuff on and feel it to be able to put the image out, and people are connecting with that. But anybody else from the audience, anything you want to add on
Thank you.
that?
That's really interesting. Yeah.
How long do you think you can keep this up?
Man, I don't know. Like I said, I started it and it just happened to be 15 weeks before the American election. And I mean, I asked a friend of mine, do you have any other news stories? Like, is there stuff I'm missing? And man, I got that kind of like, well, there's rhinos and there's, there's all these different stories all over the world. And I was like, oh my God, I think I have to just focus on one. I think I'm just going to focus on America because otherwise it's so easy to just get swept up. But my goal, and I don't know if I can do it because it takes so much of my time every day and I have other work jobs. But my goal is to try to do it up until the election. I'm at day 14 and I feel like I've been doing it for a lifetime. So we'll see. But with the encouragement and the support of the people that are engaging with it, it makes it much easier and more exciting to do it every day. So thank you to everyone that's participating.
Oh, and then this is very well said. Marnie comments here in the question answer. She said, your work distills all the action into a contemplative moment.
Wow,
Or is it contemplative or contemplative? I
I
don't know.
think you can use
We got that
either.
right. But I think that's
That's,
so succinctly said. That's really
yeah,
great. Yeah.
thank you for that. That's great. I
Um,
love that.
well, if you keep doing these, let's do this again when you have another dozen or so, because I think
Okay.
this was awesome, and I hope everybody out there enjoyed it. And it's recorded, so there'll be an opportunity to share this with others. But thank you all so much for coming, and I guess I'll end it now. Oh, one new message coming in. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It's not something I expected to be going beyond my living room, let alone, out into the world in this way. So thank you very, very much for coming and engaging and being here with me and with Andrew. And thank you, Andrew, for this.
Yeah, and thank
It's
you all for
great.
coming. All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks again.